The exposure triangle is a key concept in photography, and it helps you get the right exposure when you take your photos. It involves controlling three main elements: shutter speed, your aperture, and your ISO. Understanding these three elements and how they interact will help you in getting the right exposure every time you take a picture. Let's first look at the aperture or the iris. This refers to the opening in the lens of your camera that allows the light in, and it is measured in f-stops. Now, a lower f-stop number like f8 means a larger aperture. More light goes into the lens of your camera, and so you get a brighter image. Whereas a higher f-stop number like f22 refers to a smaller aperture and less light getting into the lens of the camera, the darker the image. The f-stop also affects your depth of field, and your depth of field refers to how much of your image will be in focus when you look from the front of the image where it's in sharp focus going into the background. Next, let's look at shutter speed. When you take a picture, your camera shutter opens to let in light and then closes when the picture has been taken. And so your shutter speed refers to the amount of time that your shutter is open and allowing light into your camera to hit the sensor. Now, shutter speed is measured in seconds or fractions of a second. And the higher the shutter speed, for example, 1/1000th of a second, the shorter the time the shutter is open and the less light goes into your camera. And then the longer the period your shutter is open, which means a longer shutter speed like 1/50th of a second, the more light goes into your camera because the shutter is open for longer. Shutter speed also affects motion. You use the higher shutter speeds to freeze fast moving action, and you use the lower shutter speeds to get motion blur. Lastly, ISO refers to the sensitivity of your sensor to light. The lower the number, so 1/100, the less sensitive your sensor is to light, and so you require more light to get good exposure. That lower ISO, however, means that you get a cleaner image. When you raise your ISO, you raise the sensitivity of the sensor, and so you can shoot in low light conditions. The only problem with raising the ISO is that you also introduce noise into the picture. And so when you are shooting with very high ISOs, you're likely to get grainier images when you shoot. And when you shoot with a lower ISO, you get cleaner images. And so to get good exposure, you need to balance those three elements: your aperture, your shutter speed, and your ISO. In most instances, you will choose to fix one, maybe fix your shutter speed because you want to freeze action, and then adjust the other two to get the right exposure. If you're shooting a landscape, for example, where you want everything in focus, then you want to fix your f value or your aperture so that you get everything or as much as possible in focus in your image. But if you're shooting a portrait where you want the background to be blurry, then again you choose the correct aperture to get that blurry background. So remember, changing one will affect the other two and what the image will look like. So go ahead and experiment adjusting each of those to get your desired creative effect.